Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. I am thrilled as Andy Pass, the founder and CEO of APAS Educational Group, to welcome everybody to the webinar that APAS is doing in conjunction with Learnosity. We are very excited that we've had such a wonderful turnout, and I think we're all in for a wonderful treat from our presenters, who we are going to introduce in a moment. Before we begin, just explain the logistics. First of all, the session is being recorded. All participants are asked to stay on mute, except for the last 10 minutes when we'll open it up for questions. Before that time, you can write questions into the chat box that is located below the sign that has the phone numbers on it. Questions not answered, and please send those to the host. Questions not answered due to time constraints will be answered via email later. Before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to do something. Would you please take a moment and answer one of the two questions in the chat box? The first question: how have you used technology enhanced items before? The second question: if you haven't used technology enhanced items before, is what do you hope to learn in today's session? Please go ahead and write those answers down as we pause for 1 minute and I turn this over to Rachel Murray, who is from Learnosity.
Thank you very much, Andy. So the format of this webinar is pretty straightforward. We've gone through the introductions. We're then going to take a high-level overview of the benefits of technology-enhanced item types and how they can be used in assessment and the benefits that they offer. We're going to take a specific look at the assessment features that we have talked about and discussed in our previous angles over the last 5 weeks. And they are the audio and spoken response, the math and auto scoring features, hints and worked solutions, as well as the adaptive scoring. We'll then open the floor for questions, and hopefully we will have a very productive Q&A. And as Andy said, if we don't answer any of your questions, please feel free to get back in contact. Primarily hosting this session will be Lynsey Peterson, who Andy will introduce, and Gavin Cooney, who is the founder and CEO of Learnosity. Learnosity and our technology platform would provide tools to enable our clients to add technology-enhanced assessment to their existing digital products, or indeed to build new digital products. Gavin is sitting in a hotel room with our chief engineer, Michael Sharman. In 2 hours' time, he will be going over to you too, so he's very dedicated, and I'm going to pass him over to you.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Yeah, I'm in Belfast. I'm after driving about 100 miles up to Belfast from Dublin, and myself and one of our product owners, Michael Sharman, are here, and we're going to see you two in the next 2 hours or so. So it's an unfortunately timed presentation for me, but it's fine. I'm going to see them 8 times in this tour. I'm a little bit obsessive, but please don't hold that against me. What we do is we provide a bunch of tools to allow people to build out assessments, those people being large publishers. Google use us for their internal learning, and a lot of big publishers in K-12 and beyond into higher ed. One of the things we're very, very good at is question types. We have the 55 different technology-enhanced items, and we're here to talk about that specific part of our platform today. But delighted to be doing this, and thanks very much, Andy and Lynsey and Rachel, for organising us.
Yeah, allow me to introduce Lynsey. Lynsey is the Executive Director for STEM at APAS Educational Group, and in her role, she oversees many associates who work on course development, lesson plan writing, assessment item development, textbook writing, et cetera, as a PAS does with content across the border. You can read Lynsey's bio that's currently on the screen, but I just want to say that for me it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Lynsey because numerous opportunities to work with her closely, and she's just an absolute thrill of a person to work with. And Lynsey, thank you for presenting this afternoon, and thank you for all the hard work that you do. I'm really excited to, as I've done many times, learn from you.
Thank you, Andy. I'm really excited to be here today. Working with TEIs has been something that's just been really engaging for me as a content producer. I love what we can do with these, and so to be able to share that with everyone here today is just a gift. And what I'm going to start talking about with us for today is to talk about the benefits overall, like Rachel said, the benefits of using TEIs in instruction and in assessment. You know, there's so many different applications for using TEIs in content development and in a classroom. There are 4 big benefits that we want to make sure we mention today. The first one, technology-enhanced items allow educators to dig deeper into the student thought process, to better understand the depth and the breadth of their knowledge. So when we use these targeted assessments to provide accurate results, we better inform educators about student learning, about teaching, and about content effectiveness. This provides a solid foundation for any assessment solution that we're using. Next, the various functionalities of TEIs, which we're going to discuss in greater detail through the presentation. They allow for the creation of realistic environments that engage student focus and participation. Then we have studies that have demonstrated that an interactive platform increases student motivation and focus. And finally, TEIs are easy and efficient to administer. It requires much less oversight than traditional assessments. The technology aspect allows for auto-grading, report generating, which means that grading is no longer such a labor-intense process. So educators can focus on what the assessments mean rather than creating and scoring them. And if we can pass the control over to me, I would love to show everybody a couple items that we have created at APAS just to give you a flavor of how they can engage students. And you should be able to see my screen. I've brought up a sample activity that we've produced in Learnosity. And this first item is an upper elementary science item. So this could be used to assess student understanding of an NGSS standard that's about making observations about materials based on their properties. You can see that the student is able to interact with the item. So they're able to, you know, what's attracted to a magnet? Well, paper clips would be attracted to a magnet. Baking soda would not. And they're able to classify materials based on their properties. And they can do it not only based on magnetism, but also on whether or not it dissolves in water. So what I like about this is it reminds me a lot of what a student would do, you know, in a lab activity. And it makes the assessment more authentic, and it's also more interactive for the students. You can see we can check the answer, and all of this is auto-gradable, which I didn't do that one. Okay, so we can see that I got these 2 right. It's adaptable, so you can figure out different ways to make this work for your classroom or for your assessment, but it's all going to be auto-gradable and all adaptable. Next item I have is a math item. This is 6th grade, early middle school. It requires students to solve a problem using ratio reasoning, then plot the response using a bar graph. So by having to plot the response using the bar graph, you can see they can click and drag up the bars. But it's building connections. The student is using newer skills with ratio reasoning and connecting them to skills they may already have with building bar graphs. So that increases the interactivity and I think the learning. And finally, and again, checking the answer, all auto-gradable, and I got it wrong. Finally, this last one I have is a high school social studies item, and it uses the highlight functionality. So this type of item, you know, you might have seen something like this as multiple choice where, you know, we're asking which phrase best asserts the principle of popular sovereignty. And maybe we would have, in another assessment, given them 4 answer choices that were phrases from this text. Well, instead, the student's interacting with the text here. They can highlight the phrase that they think is best. And all of these tokens, they're called, for the highlights, are adaptable. You can make it select particular words, particular phrases, entire paragraphs, sentences. So, and again, it's still going to be auto-gradable. This is just a very small sample of the different types of content you can put into TEIs. And it's also just a very small sample of what we've done at APAS. But I wanted to give you just some information and some examples there. Okay, so the first specialized item type we're going to explore in detail here today is the audio item. Audio items allow educators to upload audio files that are then played for the learner. This can be combined with the function allowing students to record their spoken response. These functions allow for the assessment of listening and comprehension, recall, and speaking skills, as well as the creation of real-world interactive environment for assessment. So for the benefits, in many situations where audio TIs will be used, such as foreign language learning, a real-world dynamic requires listening, comprehension, speaking skills. The educator recording audio played to the learner recreates the listening and comprehension parts of the dynamic, while the student-recorded spoken responses recreate the speaking part. Both can be combined to create a realistic conversation-like dynamic. Next, in certain fields, like language learning, we as educators want to know that learners have the skills that will allow them to excel in the subject matter. This means educators need to know that students can both understand and speak the language competently. The only way to do this is through this listen-speak dynamic. An on-paper assessment will never be able to recreate this or provide an accurate and thorough assessment of these skills, but TEIs can. In order to achieve the listen-speak dynamic, normally educators would sit down with each student individually and have a conversation. But with audio TEIs, educators can record their portion once, and students can, at teacher discretion, listen and respond on their own time. Likewise, teachers can evaluate the assessments when it's convenient for them, instead of doing it in the moment during an in-class assessment. This means the assessment can also be longer and therefore more thorough, because generally speaking responses will be faster than handwriting or typing them out. And then a private environment allows learners to feel more at ease during the assessment, allowing for an accurate assessment of their skills. Finally, students who need higher or lower volumes can adjust it according to their own specific needs. So at this point, it's my pleasure to let Gavin show us how those audio and spoken response items work in Learnosity.
Okay, so we have a bunch of audio here. In fact, we have a million users who just use our audio functionality. It was a specialism from our organization, and it was where we kind of began. It was our first question type. We started this whole thing, and we were asked by a number of very large language publishers to provide a audio recording question, and that's where we kind of began. So, and we need to do this for millions of users. We need to do this for large numbers of concurrent users at any one time, and that it provides challenges both at the server side in building the application and in making sure that the stuff works in kind of low bandwidth scenarios. We're talking about English language learners in the outer reaches of Africa and Asia and so on. And we needed something that was going to work in Nigeria. If it works in Nigeria, it'll work in Boston or something, and very much at scale. So this is what we created. We created this audio question. It's very simple, but it has an enormous amount of functionality behind the scenes. The user simply clicks on record, records their voice, and that's that. I can press pause, I can press resume, and I can press stop. It records how long it is. It shows me my microphone volume as it goes along. And that's it. I can replay that sample, and I'm doing it through my computer speakers, but record their voice, and there you go. So, and it instantly creates this nice waveform to show that they have a very nice good recording and so on. We have then all sorts of stuff going on here where in the background we take 10-second chunks of audio and upload it. And that means that if there's a problem with the internet while I'm speaking, it doesn't affect the audio quality. Massively important. We've all been on that Skype call when the internet started going slow and the audio quality degrades. So that doesn't happen here because we're slightly asynchronously uploading the audio in 10-second chunks as we go along. Then we make it really, really customizable and so on. Here's an example where I'm going to record my audio, and I'm going to say whatever I say, and now it gives me some feedback on it. So, programmatically, we can guess back to the page, was it too loud? Was there too much noise in the background? All those kind of things. Was it too silent? Maybe I'll try that again. I'll be silent this time. Now it tells me it was too quiet. So a lot of things we can do here, some really advanced features, and obviously working there at literally millions of users. There's a million users who just use audio, then there's a couple more million who use it as part of a suite of features. And show you how this is authored. Really kind of simple stuff. There's the default player. I can turn off the pause button. I can turn off the, do all these, turn off the play button, these types of things. Is there a play bubble? Is there a progress bar? Is there a seek to seek ahead and so on? And that's all really, really simple to author, and then generally you'll create a template for your authors to use. So there's the audio functionality. Really simple but massively powerful, and the stuff you don't see, the bit beneath the iceberg, that's the power of it. So I'll pass the mic back to the guys.
What we're going to be asked to do in a moment, as soon as we see the slide, is to write a question that you have about anything that you've seen so far. And in order to encourage participation, what we'd like is for at least 2 questions that our speakers can respond to before we move on. How could this apply in a classroom situation? Pam Schroeder asks. Is this available on a small screen like a web? Is there a limit to how long the recording can be? Gavin, why don't you take a few minutes to answer some of these questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so limit to how long the recording could be. There's no practical limit. In fact, we could record all day or all year, and it will take those 10-second chunks, and we'll upload them in the background as we go along. What we tend to do is just put in a limit of, say, 10 minutes, just so it doesn't, just go wild and somebody leaves it on accidentally on an idle computer or something like that. So we just we just pick an arbitrary length and we put it in there. Sometimes, though, as part of the assessment design, you might want to get a 12-second response for something, or get a 4-second response, repeat a word in just a few seconds, and you could limit it that way. Moving on to the mobile question, yes, all of our stuff is responsive in terms of different screens and so on. A big challenge there was making it work not in Flash, but in a thing called Web or RTC, which is the way that HTML5 does audio recording, which we added in probably about 18 months ago or so. So any Android device and that kind of thing will work. Unfortunately, Apple have not signed up to that and don't make that work in Safari. So it has to be in a native app on an Apple. But on Android, absolutely, it's all there. In fact, all of our questions are really responsive and work down to the iPhone size screen on a phone. That goes from multiple choice to math to audio to whatever.
Gav, why don't you keep answering them for a couple minutes, since I think we have time and people are asking questions.
Okay, cool. I'm not seeing the wall though, so I'm going to just
functionality, Gavin, been used for assessing reading fluency?
Diana, can you repeat that question, please?
Has this functionality been used for assessing reading fluency?
Yes, absolutely. So it's used an awful lot in language learning situations. It's used in all sorts of reading comprehension, read aloud stuff. Teachers are listening to that later on. Vocab exercises, really doing a lot of the speaking elements of language learning. And generally, we allow teachers do the grading. We provide the answers back to provide the responses back to a teacher to grade. Now, it can be and has been linked up to one of the engines that does auto scoring of audio answers. And we've done some integrations there where you say Peterson, for example, have Peterson Knowledge Technologies, which is their auto scoring engine for audio. And we can shoot over those responses in there and get a grade out of that and pass it back to the system.
Hey, Gavin. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, go ahead, Andy.
How have teachers adapted to providing separate rooms for students to record or provide audio responses?
Well, generally, this is kind of this is the modern language lab, right? It's one of those things that we actually found that we can have about 30 kids in a room on headsets, all speaking at the same time, and we find the noise is as such that it works pretty well, and kids can go and engage properly on that. It's just a little hum in the back of the room, and it's no problem. And we found some, and without naming any customers and getting into it in any detail, some very big brand names of language testing and of language tuition, which are powered by Learnosity's audio assessments, and then they can auto grade on certain things like pronunciation and so on. I'm not a big fan of auto scoring of audio. I believe it's kind of limiting, and somebody like me who is fluent English, but probably by the estimation of most people on the call, a terrible accent might fail on those things. So I'm not a massive believer in auto scoring and something else.
Okay, so I don't know if, Gavin, you saw Rachel's note or not, but I'm going to end the questions here for the time being, and we can always ask them at the end. And if you have further questions, you can either write them to, info@apasseducationalgroup.com, or when Gavin will tell you what address to send it to at Learnosity. But let's please continue.
We were talking a little bit about auto grading with audio, and we're going to get more into auto grading now. We're going to talk about math and auto grading, because it was formerly true that auto grading could only occur with any degree of accuracy in the structured response framework, multiple choice, fill in the blank. But now with the math auto scoring, educators can create open-ended questions that are still auto scorable. The item author can use Learnosity's features to define a set of parameters that the correct answer must meet. This allows students to enter responses, x squared plus 3x plus 6, or square root of 2 as an answer, and the item remains auto-scorable. A variety of the on-screen keyboards ensure that students will always be able to enter any needed mathematical expression. So the benefits of having this math auto-scoring, we got it up now, yay. So first one here, we've got open-ended questions. They're inherently better assessors of student ability. They require the student to work all the way through the answer, rather than using strategies such as elimination or guessing. Next, there's natural drawbacks that are inherent in structured response questions. It's always possible that a student may simply guess the correct answer. It's difficult, sometimes impossible, to avoid giving the student clues that might nudge them down the path to the correct answer. You've got to craft plausible answer choices. Structured responses give students second chances when their answer doesn't match any given answer choices. It tells the student their answer is incorrect. They have a chance to redo the question. All of these issues are solved by an open-ended question. But in the past, we didn't have the ability to auto-score. Now auto-scoring is still an option even with this open-ended. Educators can fully assess skills according to the parameters while maintaining the efficiency of auto-scoring. This means they'll no longer have to choose between a thorough assessment and efficiency. And instead of spending a significant amount of time on creating and inputting distractors, item authors can simply adjust validation settings instead, which concurrently reduces the risk of human error. And then Finally, the various validation settings in Learnosity allow for complete customization of answers accepted as correct. Item authors can allow terms to be entered in any order or require they be entered in a specific format. All equivalent forms can be accepted, while the original expression is excluded. Decimals or fractions can score as correct or only 1. Simplified fractions can be required or optional. Factored forms of an equation can be accepted. Expanded forms are not. Any of these options are possible. Often, many of these settings can be combined to create an exact set of parameters that's narrow or as broad as the item author desires. It's really powerful. Gavin, you want to give us a demonstration of this?
Yeah, I'd love to. If you want to, I'll share my screen if you can maybe presenter. Great.
There you go.
Okay, so if you can all see my screen, I presume you can. I'm back into the Learnosity website. I'm back on the learnosity.com/demos. This is where I demoed the audio piece before. I'm going to back up here. I'm going to have a look at some of the math questions. So this math scoring is massively complex, but massively powerful. And it came actually from a need to make authoring simple. It came from a need to make, before if you had a simple math question, and the answer was say 3/4, the author had to think of everything that was kind of valid around 3/4. 3/4, 0.75, 0.75, 0.750. Very difficult to do tolerances or anything else. Now we've built this math engine to make it really, really simple for authors to do things. So first thing I want to show you here is mathematical equivalence. So what we're going to accept as an answer here is anything that is, as it implies, equivalent to that answer. So I'm going to go x by x plus 4 plus 3. That's my answer to this. Check answer, and that's correct. Great. Now, what if I make that the square root of 9? Still correct. What if I make that 8 minus 2 squared? That's still correct. And what it enables here is just to check the mathematical equivalence. It doesn't matter what format it's in. You can then do sort of fill in the blanks expressions, where here I'm filling in the blank, and then I am checking the answer of the whole equation that has been created based on all the little inputs along the way. Here's equations where I'm scoring both sides of the sides of the equation. Then I've got inequality. So anything that's greater than or equal to 23 is correct. So 77. That's going to be correct. There's no check answer button on this one. Values. The answer is 87.7. If I put in 87.8, because I have tolerances in there, it still marks it as correct. If I had 87.8 random number, it's still correct because it's within a tolerance of 0.2. Ratios, this is 3:2. That's going to be correct. Unit comparisons. It's a great example here of why you need a math engine. The answer is 5 meters. I'm going to put in 16.4 feet. That's still correct. 16.40 something feet. Still correct. Incredibly complex engine behind this to really score it. If you look at, say, Reddit.com or any Amazon.com and look at the reviews of some of the math products out there that don't have this kind of scoring, it's comical. It's certainly something you should check out. That's what happens when you don't have math scoring. We do matrices. We do here's a math essay. This is an auto score. This is where I can show my working. So I say, first I will multiply by, whatever, and then I go in and I put in I show my workings. So I do, A by whatever. So I can show a multi-line solution there for my teacher to grade. Here's I got fill in the blanks math where I'm putting inside paragraphs and can lay it out however I want, and different partial scoring, and also math on an image as well. So I can use this. I can have a protractor. I can see how that works, and so on. hugely powerful, and they're available for anybody to use. Makes this stuff very simple. Actually extends into chemistry and stuff as well, but I won't spend too much time on that. Back over to you guys.
Well, and I'm very partial because I'm the STEM director, but this is my favorite thing. I love that math auto scoring, and I like the chemistry too. So thank you, Gavin.
We spent it has taken a few years of dedicated resources. We've got 3 people working on this full time at the moment, and it's very complex. But it's a problem that needed to be solved. It's a problem that authoring was too difficult in math, and it's something that we really need to solve there. So, sorry, back to you. I didn't mean to cut across you.
No, it's great. I love it. All right, Andy, are you going to ask for questions now?
I sure am. Good question, Lynsey. So please tell us again, based on what you've seen in the last few minutes, and either Gavin or Lynsey will answer them. And again, we're going to ask for at least 2 questions before we continue on. As a teacher, I learned wait time. You have to wait, and people will ask questions.
Well, we do have a question that's not showing up on the main chat. Does this integrate easily with CTB vendors like Pearson VUE?
Well, it's basically it's a toolkit that Pearson could use if they want to. In fact, Pearson uses it hugely extensively in about a dozen or so different products. Pearson VUE isn't one of them. Certainly they could do, and this can be delivered in any browser, whether that's mobile browser, high stakes assessment browser, just on your own computer, whatever. So it can go anywhere, and yes, it can be integrated in there, we work extensively with Pearson, but not in the Pearson VUE organization. I see another question here from Gretchen about Learnosity EBSR template for linked items. Yes, we do. We have different EBSR items. We have and Michael will. Can you tell me the names of those again?
So the EBSR is a question type coming out of, and we have different scoring models on the item. EBSR is just one of those. We actually have 3 different scoring types. But the answer to the question is you can do EBSR scoring on any question type. It's all to do with just whichever question you want to use, and you need at least 2 questions on an item. That's a bit of a divergence to where we're at. I'm not sure if you want to demonstrate that at all.
No, I'm not going to go into it right now, but there is a few different types. The types are dependent scoring, EBSR scoring, and
dichotomous. Basically, you need to get all the answers correct to get a point on that item.
Right. So, so 2 separately scored questions in the same item. You need to get them both right before you get any score at all. So yeah, we have that in there as well. And again, just kind of trying to take care of some of those complex authoring tasks and the difficult things there before. Really simple to author. Haven't got it up on the screen at the moment, but very simple to author that. You just put in two items and you choose you put in 2 questions in one item, and then you choose the type of scoring, dichotomous, independent, or EBSR.
So if there are no other questions, let's keep going.
Sure. Okay. So in a traditional assessment environment, there's little opportunity to fairly help students arrive at the correct answer. There is essentially no ability to show them how the correct answer can be reached soon after they've completed the question or even the assessment. But with a hints feature, both of these constraints of traditional assessments are eliminated. Question authors can provide hints and work solutions to students with a variety of options. This includes allowing students to decide whether to view hints, and then tracking, the information of what they're viewing. So the benefits of this, first, a traditional assessment employs that strict question-answer dynamic, but utilizing the hints feature allows students to click a button when they need help. It creates another level of interactivity, enabling the students to take control of their assessment and engaging them in what's a cooperative environment. Next, you've got multiple hints that can be created. Usually the hints begin generally, and then those hints are designed to spark the student's memory. Then the hints can get progressively more detailed and provide greater levels of help. This allows the creation of custom scaffolding to help guide students to the correct answer. A final hint can even include a full worked out solution to use as a final teaching opportunity. Next, the feature allows educators to use assessments as teaching tools rather than just simply testing student knowledge. By guiding students to the correct answer, students learn much more than if they'd just gotten the question wrong and then the assessment continued. And instead of students individually seeking instructor help, question creators can create hints that those hints are entered a single time, and then the students click on them as they need it, or if they don't need them, they don't click on them. Students choose which hints to view, which to ignore, and so the assessment is self-customized by the student to meet their needs. And then finally, Learnosity allows the educators to turn on hint tracking, which shows which students viewed which hints. That allows generation of reports to help educators better understand the content areas that were challenging to students as a whole. And it allows educators to better plan learning pathways. So Gavin will show us how this works in Learnosity.
I sure will, thank you. While my screen is coming up, I'll explain our thinking as we went through this. We were asked about hints, distractor analysis, feedback, all different things. We're asked for kind of the same thing in different language and very similar language, but vastly different things. And we didn't want to be too prescriptive about what one of our partners would want to do. We didn't want to restrict them in any way. We wanted to make it nice and broad and let them kind of build what they want to build up, because we feel this is an area that our customers, Houghton Mifflin or Peterson or whoever, will want to kind of differentiate themselves. So what we've done there is we've tried to make it a really broad solution. I'm going to give you two different examples here. Basically, how it works under the hood is you're allowed to add whatever you want into the question. An administrator can set up a structure that's going to be stored in Learnosity, and that can be, for the developers out there, an array or a structure of arrays or an array of structures or whatever, and you can use them however you want. And here's two examples. First one here is where I'm going to get some hints. So calculate the tax income in Australian dollars and 88. I get a hint and it shows it to me over here. Now, where it's shown, in fact, the fact that there's a hint button, that's all in control from the publisher. But we're allowing the persistence. We're allowing to store those hints, author those hints really effectively, and store them. So I'll try that again. I got two hints, and it showed me over on the right-hand side, and I know no hints left. Let's see another hint. Let's see another hint, and another, and another. So here, the use case was I just want to show multiple hints, and I want to show them on the right-hand side. And we enabled that authoring, enabled those hints to get to the page, and then the page itself, which belong to a customer, shows the hints. Next example is more conditional hinting, distractor rationale, and some people call them. So what's the capital of Uruguay? And I say Dublin. And it tells me no, it begins with an N. Here's one where what's the city on the east coast of Australia? It's Sydney, where I live. That's great, that's correct. But my hint is, have I answered all possible responses? Now I'm going to say Perth as well. Check answer. No, Perth is on the west coast. And now it will give me the correct answer. What's the capital of England? Let's say Dublin. Absolutely not. There it is. Dublin is the capital of Ireland. And maybe Liverpool. I said no. The capital of England is on the River Thames. And you can do this all you want, and you can have that feedback as complex as you want to make it. Again, there's just some work goes into that when it comes to authoring. So there we go. Ireland is not the capital of Ireland is not Canberra, and it tells me the capital of Australia is midway between Sydney and Melbourne. And oh yeah, I'll put that in here. Great. So so we have that both kind of conditional feedback, distractor rationale we call it sometimes, and just straight out hints. You can have sample answers. You can basically dream whatever you want up there in this area. Again, you can author and store all this stuff with the questions, and we make it really, really simple to do that.
We're going to wait for at least one question Gavin asked. I'm sorry, I'm sorry that I'm a little bit slow. How many times will it say the answer hasn't been completed?
Well, that's all configurable. So you can decide to show that feedback or not. You can decide how to show it or how many attempts you let a student see. You can also decide if you want to show the feedback and hints live in the moment, or maybe you want to show the feedback, a week later in some sort of report. Hey, here's your report. Here's how you did in the test, and I'm going to ask you about. Here's the feedback in question 7 that you got wrong. Perhaps it's done that way. It doesn't have to be done live. All those things are down to the application that's doing it. What Learnosity's job is to make authoring of those hints, distractors, feedback, sample answers, whatever you want to call it, or whatever they are. We want to make that authoring easy and deliver that information to the page, and the application then can decide what to do. What form does a report take for the teacher? Again, that's entirely up to the application. We have a bunch of different forms, and I can show you some reports. But in some cases, we are tracking the user, and we know that over the last 6 months, user Gavin has done well in algebra and bad in trigonometry, or can show maybe a heat map of the curriculum and show exactly how they've done. And that's not over one test, not over 10 tests, but over the 100 tests and the 1,000 questions they've answered over the last 6 months. We can look at that information and provide that kind of feedback, whether it's over a certain time period, over all eternity, and so on. And then because you have every data, because you know about every question, you know what each question was, what the what was in each question, what curriculum outcome was being targeted, what subject it was, and so on. We know about every single question. We all know about every single response to every single question, and then the score of every single question. So we can take all that information and we can give really great reports based on student, class, school, district, whatever, and you can do that over time and so on. And I'll add one more, which was would an assessment using these hints of distractor rationale be able to copy to another assessment that doesn't allow hints, say a practice test or a true test? Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we can author those hints with the question. If you want, you can not show those hints during the question. In fact, send them nowhere near the computer that the student is using, because they can never kind of look at it in any way. I'll give you another example of that. For regular formative assessments, we generally do, 90% of the time we'll do instant feedback or instant scoring. And we think it's a really positive thing in formative and in homework and so on. But for a really true test, a summative test, a high-stakes test and so on, we don't want instant feedback. So what we do is we strip the correct answer from the question before it gets anywhere near the computer of the student who's doing it. And we can instantly score it when it's submitted and show the score after the fact, a week later or a day later or whatever. But we don't show it instantly. And again, it's up to the person who's building the application to do it. And can TEI be used for high-stakes assessments, high-stakes testing? And if so, how? Absolutely. I mean, the TEI is exactly like any other question. It's just asking a question and getting a response, and it can be used in many ways, and it is quite widely used. We've delivered, I think the figure as of yesterday was 49 million tests in the last 30 days, and some of those and a lot of those are using TEIs, and a lot of them nearly all of them are using TEIs, and a bunch of them are kind of higher stakes or certainly summative assessments. Do we find any TEIs work better? Or more?
Gavin, can I for 1 second with that answer and just say that I think with the increased reliance on technology for PARC and SBAC tests in the United States, in the U.S., we are moving towards increased reliance on technology-enhanced items because people have realized that it just allows a deeper look into the students' competencies and deficiencies. So I would say absolutely, and for that same reason, these tests can be used at lower levels, even practice levels, because what's the goal of a test in the first place? It is to determine what a student knows. High stakes, we're not going to necessarily go back and review those shortcomings with the student immediately, but certainly with interim assessments, we can do that, and so TEIs are great for that as well.
And look, it comes back to here about why we're doing this, okay? We have a mission. I know Andy shares the vision of trying to improve education. And frankly, I find that a lot of education products are behind the times, and it's kind of sad to see that because it's just great technology in a lot of other areas. And Learnosity and APAS are both, in their own ways, trying to solve that problem, trying to create better education. And when I think of it, I'm a technology CEO, okay? And one of the things that my developers will tell me when we're talking about scalability, we're talking about delivering millions of tests. When we want to make something better, we measure it. We measure how many tests have been done. We measure what the usage of it on each server. We measure a million different things. You should see the dashboards we have. It's amazing. And it goes back to the same as in education. If you want to improve it, you measure it. And TEIs are a better measurement. They are a more they are a more interactive thing for a student. And assessment doesn't have to be one test at the end of the year. Assessment should be done every day. It should be comprehension assessments as you go along to really understand that the learner is learning and be able to adapt their teaching, whether that's done on a computer or whether the teacher is then going to realize, look at a report and see, oh, hey, the class did not get that topic, so let's revisit it. And so, I think TEIs are massively important to that goal. And I'll just ask one last question while the guys go off to take their screen again. Have we found that certain TEIs work better or are more user-friendly for certain different grade levels? We find that, I have young nieces and nephews, and they're playing away on iPads and they're dragging and dropping stuff, and they're doing really cool stuff, and they're engaging really well. And I think that the younger the student, certainly the shinier and the more playful we can make an assessment or a lesson, I think it's very, very important. Multiple choice isn't going to go so well. But getting back to it, there's a lot of stuff that is grade specific. Cartesian graphing, we have a lot of Cartesian graphing questions, and that's grade specific. We have a lot of audio stuff that's done, at young and old levels, and that's kind of a universal thing. Speaking is a universal thing. So everything is fit for purpose, and everything is designed properly. And sometimes we'll find people using them, for kids as low as 4 and 5 years of age, and going right up to retirement.
Gavin, let me comment on that for 1 minute if I can. I mean, I would say Gavin and I wouldn't be working together if we both didn't have deep respect for one another's companies. But ultimately, whether or not technology-enhanced items can be used at different grade levels depends on how the questions are written and constructed. And it could certainly be used for kindergarten students because kindergarten students know how, as Gavin said, know how to use iPads and great deal of other technologies. It can be used by senior citizens. It can be used by college students. The trick is, are you writing an engaging question, creating an engaging task that students, learners of particular grades will be able to engage with?
I think that's a great point. It is about authoring. It is building stuff that's fit for purpose and fit for the audience that you have.
Why don't we continue?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I find it very intuitive when you interact with these things. It's just a matter of building a good question in terms of knowing where your students are coming from. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this adaptive assessments, the adaptivity of these assessments. All right, so adaptive assessments are going to adjust the level of difficulty of future questions based on student performance up to that point in the assessment. Most basically, answering questions correctly leads to a more difficult question. Answering them incorrectly results in less challenging questions. So, that's the basics of what we're talking about with adaptive assessments. All right, so here's your benefits. First off, we've got students able to move quickly through questions. They're moving through questions that are below their skill level. So the assessments quickly arrive at a level that actually is challenging the students. They're not wasting their time answering questions that are far above or below their abilities. And that means that the assessment is targeting the student's current ability level, providing educators with a more accurate picture of what the student knows and what they don't. And, when you think about this, it leads us to our next benefit. These high-achieving students are sometimes experiencing decreased motivation because they're consistently working below their abilities. They're not being challenged. Adaptive scoring means that the more challenging questions will engage them and motivate those high-achieving students. And on the other side of that coin, we've got struggling students, and they get discouraged because when they're consistently presented with information and questions that are out of their current reach, it's just frustrating. If you've got adaptive assessments, you ensure that while the students are still challenged, they're not overwhelmed. So like we're talking about with the hints feature, educators can track adaptive assessments. Reports can be generated that give educators accurate, in-depth insight into their students' ability levels. We can look at how far students advanced up in the adaptive ladder, which content areas most students struggled with. Educators can use this information regarding both the depth and the breadth of their students' ability to adapt their own teaching, changing up lesson plans and goals to realistically align with current performance. So, Scott, are you able to give Gavin control one last time so he can show us the adaptive scoring possibilities, or shall I do so?
No, I can do it.
Sorry, guys, I'm having a little trouble with my internet connection as well. I am on the phone, so it's. I think we're okay. I think. Can you see my screen right now? Yes. Okay. So, adaptive testing. As described there, look, the way I describe it, really just to simplify it is, if you want to give myself, Andy, and Albert Einstein a physics test, Einstein's going to get pretty bored pretty quickly with all the very simple answers, but he needs to get really more difficult questions every time he gets something right, so we can have an accurate assessment of his abilities. Andy might meander through the middle, get some right, some wrong, and get kind of end up with a medium score or medium difficult questions. And I will get a load wrong, and terrible at science, I get a load wrong, and I'll get easier and easier questions. Now I'll come out of that not kind of upset about it, not I will have got some right, some wrong. It won't be a harrowing experience for me as a weak student. That's where adaptive testing, I think, really comes in. You get a shorter assessment with a more accurate result without kind of disenfranchising the best and the worst of the students. Let's click on start here, and I said there is some internet difficulties here. I'm in a hotel room. So let's start here, and what's doing here is it's starting off with a question, the difficulty of 0.04. That's been pre-calibrated. We've kind of run every question through maybe 10,000 times to really work out the difficulty level of the question. So what happens is we pre-calibrate items. That means we give them to students in regular non-adaptive assessments, or we seed them into adaptive assessments, i.e. throw them in as dummy questions in an adaptive assessment. And as you go through and you click next after answering every question, it works out if you got it right or wrong. It scores it, works out if you got it right or wrong, and it gives you a more difficult or more easy question for your next question. And it goes through here and gives you increasingly difficult or increasingly easy questions. Works really, really well, and something we built. And you can do also author assessments like, look, I want 2 parts chemistry and 1 part biology, and for every 8th item, I wanted a seeding item from this bunch of items over here, and I want to have it start at this difficulty level and so on. And we have a really powerful tool there to allow that adaptive testing. And you can go onto our demo site, demos.learnosity.com, and under the items API, you can play with it yourselves. The other thing then is what we call branching. The item adaptive is standard Roche model item adaptive stuff. Literally textbook. There's a formula in the textbook that decides what the next item should be. We did that, and then we also did branching. Branching is often what people think about when they think of adaptive assessments. The idea being that you have a series of assessments, and as you do well or poorly, you end up getting a new assessment. So it may be a testlet of 5 questions, and if you get between 3 and 5 right, you get the next test A. If you get 1 or 2 right, you get test B. That's there. And I think there was a question earlier on about was it dichotomous scoring or not? And basically, was there is it always right and wrong that decides if it's a more difficult or more easy question, or is there some sort of score for every item that can do so? At the moment, we do dichotomous. We do it's correct or it's incorrect. We don't do the partial scoring piece, the polygonous or what it's called. And that was just out of need with our clients that we've used it. I've used it so far on the dichotomous scoring. The other thing it was possible to do here is you can use your own adaptive engine and still use our interface, still use our questions, still use our scoring. And that means instead of going off to Learnosity server to decide what question comes next, you go off to your own server. It's a developer piece, of course, but I know it's very important to some organizations to use your own adaptive engine. They do see it as their own special sauce and on their own something that they really want to own themselves. Any more questions around that? I know there's one here about XAPI, or a comment about XAPI, and that's certainly something that we're on board with. We have an events tracking API for that. Not something we're going to cover today, but XAPI is definitely one of the things. Did you miss the description of how you calibrate items by difficulty? Yeah, extensive field testing is exactly it. They're either seeded into existing tests as dummy items that don't kind of change the grade in an existing test. And basically, you need to take the estimates vary, but between 1,000 and 10,000 tests. If each item is seeded into 1,000 to 10,000 tests, we end up with a good estimate of just how difficult that is. And you calculate what we call a P-score. And from there, each item has a P-score, and we can decide what difficulty level it is. The screen we have here just shows the differences between item adaptive. And item adaptive, you have individual items and a route between them. In branching, you have small tests and a route between those. That's the difference between branching and item adaptive. And I think a lot of people confuse the two, and a lot of people, when they say adaptive, they mean branching.
I think in looking at the time and knowing that people expected this to end at 1, what I would strongly recommend is that if you have a question and need to go, please do email either info@apasseducation.com or Learnosity. And let me say that I am just thrilled. First of all, we can stay on for those who want to stay on afterwards and ask and answer questions. But I want to say that I'm thrilled with the turnout for this webinar, and I'm thrilled with what I've learned during it. I hope you all agree that it was a very positive experience, and thank you for joining APAS Educational and Learnosity. And if you have any ideas for future themed webinars and the angles that go with it, I would be thrilled if you'd let me know. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And if there are additional questions, please do stay and ask them. And to get your phone off of mute, please press *6. *6.
We do have a question on the chat box. Gavin, probably for you, if you're still on, do the number of questions vary within the branches? What % of these questions need to be answered correctly before progressing? Back to our adaptive assessments.
Okay, so the number of questions vary within branches, and what percentage of these questions need to be answered correctly before progressing? So the first one, do they vary? Yeah, so the branches, each testlet in the branch is just a test. From our point of view, we don't care if it's one question or 100 questions. It's just a test. In fact, you can have, to blow your mind here, you can have an adaptive test inside a branching test. But the point is, then at the end of the test, the determination is made. So the author of the branching series of tests can decide the decisions. It can be, a really simple example is 10 questions in a testlet. And you might say, if you get between 7 and 10, you go to test 2A. If you get between 6 and 4, you get 2B. And if you get below 4, you get some sort of remedial exercise, lesson, or test called 2C, and so on. So the tolerances around that are authored. The author decides what those are. And the tests themselves, the testlets that are in the branching, are authored, and again, they could be 100 questions, they could be one question, they could be an adaptive test, they can be anything. And that's the kind of beauty of it here. You're trying to leave the power in the hands of the author.
Thank you guys very much. It was an absolute pleasure participating with you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. And glad I'm an hour away from my YouTube concert, so I'll go off and do that now. But really enjoyed that, and glad to speak to anybody offline about it. Just please feel free to give me a shout at any stage if you have any questions.